The crystal chandeliers stopped swaying, not because the earth stopped moving, not because time froze, but because someone did what no one in Seoul's underworld had ever dared to do. The sound of crystal meeting wrist echoed like a gunshot through marble halls. The entire Park family estate went silent. Not because the elegant party ended. Not because someone collapsed, but because someone did the impossible. In the center of the grand marble hall, under the glittering European chandeliers and beside the traditional Korean fountains, Miss Jessica Jimin, the Mafia boss's stunning fiancée, pointed her manicured finger sharply at a trembling housekeeper, ready to destroy her life like she always did. Everyone froze. The household staff in their crisp uniforms. The security guards in tailored black suits positioned by every entrance. Even the family's elderly advisor stopped mid-bow. They all knew what was coming. Because 3 months ago, Jessica had a security guard's family evicted from their home for the crime of making eye contact. 2 weeks ago, a maid's daughter lost her university scholarship after Jessica made a single phone call. Tonight's victim? Still unknown. But everyone in that room knew someone was about to lose everything. Jessica always crushed someone when she was upset. And tonight, she was very upset. But something unexpected happened. A voice cut through the silence. Not loudly, not rudely, but firmly, like a river that refuses to change its course even against stone. It was the new maid, Amy Davis. A black woman from Atlanta. A woman who started only 5 days ago. A woman nobody expected to even raise her eyes, let alone speak against the Mafia boss's fiancé in front of 20 terrified staff members. But here she was, speaking calmly in her accented English, refusing to stay quiet. Every person turned to stare. What did you just say? Jessica hissed in perfect English, her voice cold as winter steel, her Korean accent sharp enough to cut glass. But Amy didn't back down. Her posture stayed steady. Her brown eyes stayed respectful but unshakable. Her natural hair framed her face like a crown of quiet dignity. And then, unknown to everyone, the Mafia boss himself, Park Min-ho, stood at the top of the marble staircase, stepping back inside from taking an urgent phone call. He stopped walking. He heard the tension crackling through his home. He turned his head slowly. Then he saw it. His fiancée trying to humiliate a desperate worker, and a foreign stranger standing in her way. Min-ho didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched. His heart beating faster because something inside him finally began to question everything about the elegant woman he planned to marry. And beside him, materializing like a ghost in traditional hanbok, his grandmother, Halmini Park, appeared. Her aged eyes took in the scene with the wisdom of someone who survived wars and built empires. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of mountains. "So this is the woman you chose to stand beside you?" And the next words Jessica shouted shook the entire estate and would change everything that came after. "You're fired. Security. Remove this woman from my house immediately." But Amy's voice did not waver. Her response was calm, clear, and devastating in its simple truth. "Ma'am, with respect, this isn't your house. And that woman you're trying to fire? Her son is in the hospital fighting for his life." That moment, that single moment, would change everything. And then a collective gasp echoed through the estate because something even more shocking happened next. Jessica tried to storm away, but the housekeeper she was about to fire suddenly dropped to her knees. Her voice cracked in Korean, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Miss Jessica, please don't do this. My son needs me. I'm all he has." Her tears fell openly. Everyone stared at the broken woman in disbelief. And from the marble staircase, Min-ho whispered to himself in Korean, "What kind of woman have I been planning to marry?" And just as he stepped forward to intervene, someone else walked toward him from the shadows. Someone who wasn't supposed to be at the estate. Someone whose presence would unravel 3 years of carefully constructed lies. But before we get to who it was, we must go back to the very beginning. Because everything that happened in that marble hall started long before this moment. Long before Amy Davis ever stepped foot on Korean soil. long before she knew that speaking one truth would expose a web of crimes that stretched from Busan to Seoul to countries across Asia. The story began 6 weeks earlier, on a rainy afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia, 6 weeks before that impossible moment in the Marble Hall. Amy Davis sat in seat 42K of Korean Air Flight 036, watching Atlanta disappear beneath the clouds. Her grandmother's Bible rested on her lap, the worn leather cover still warm from being clutched during takeoff. Inside the front page, written in her grandmother's shaky handwriting just days before she passed, were the words Amy couldn't stop reading. Baby, justice speaks every language. Don't ever stop speaking truth. 6 weeks ago, Amy Davis had reasons to run. Good reasons. The kind that follow you across oceans if you let them. Her grandmother's Bible, the one resting on her lap right now, held the last words Grandma Davis ever wrote. Baby, justice speaks every language. Don't ever stop speaking the truth. Amy had stopped once. Just once. And it cost her everything she loved. The International Placement Agency's email had arrived 2 days after the funeral. Seoul, 10,000 miles from Atlanta. Far enough that maybe, she could breathe again without choking on guilt. What happened in Atlanta? That would come later when it mattered. Right now, all that mattered was that Seoul promised her invisibility. A chance to stay quiet. A chance to never speak up again. Seoul's Incheon airport felt like stepping onto another planet. Amy had never seen so many people who looked nothing like her. Everywhere she turned, curious eyes followed her movements. Children pointed. Adults stared with expressions she couldn't read. Curiosity, surprise, sometimes discomfort. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself and reminded herself that she chose this. She wanted to disappear. Well, here she was, invisible except for being the most visible person in every room. The agency driver, Mr. Kim, spoke minimal English but smiled kindly and helped with her luggage. As they drove through Seoul's gleaming streets, Amy pressed her face to the window. Neon signs in Korean characters she couldn't read. Streets so clean they looked swept by hand. Mountains rising in the distance like ancient guardians. It was beautiful and terrifying and nothing like home. Park family, Mr. Kim said, pointing ahead as they turned into a neighborhood where homes became estates and estates became fortresses. Very important, very powerful. You work hard, you be safe. The Park estate made Amy's breath catch. Traditional Korean architecture flowed seamlessly into modern luxury. Curved tile roofs over marble columns. Ancient wooden doors fitted with biometric security. Gardens that looked like paintings come to life. Through the gates, she counted at least 20 staff members moving with practiced efficiency across the grounds. Mrs. Choi, the head housekeeper, met her at the service entrance. She was perhaps 50, with kind eyes and hands that never stopped moving. Her English was careful but warm. Welcome, Miss Amy. I am Mrs. Choi. I show you everything. You work hard. Keep head down, you be okay here. That phrase again. You be okay. As if being not okay was the default expectation. Mrs. Choi led her through servants' quarters, kitchen areas, the massive main house with its mix of traditional Korean furniture and European antiques. Park Min-ho owns many hotels, many buildings in Seoul, Mrs. Choi explained. His family very old, very respected. He is complicated man. Good heart, but complicated business. Amy didn't ask what complicated business meant. She was there to clean, organize, and stay invisible. And this? Mrs. Choi said, her voice dropping as they passed a photograph of a stunning Asian woman in a designer gown. This is Miss Jessica Jimin, Mr. Park's fiancée. She is. Mrs. Choi paused, choosing words carefully. She is very particular, very high standards. When Miss Jessica is here, you stay quiet, work fast, and never disagree with her. Amy noticed how Mrs. Choi's hands trembled slightly when she said Jessica's name. It was subtle, barely visible, but Amy had spent 7 years reading body language in crisis situations. That tremor spoke of fear, deep and learned through painful experience. Is she unkind? Amy asked gently. Mrs. Choi's smile didn't reach her eyes. She is very successful woman. Very beautiful. Mr. Park loves her very much. She will be mistress of this house soon. She touched Amy's arm. Please, Miss Amy, just stay invisible around her. Is safer that way. By day 3, Amy had learned the estate's rhythms. By day 4, she understood its secrets. The things no one said out loud. She woke at 5 a.m., helped prepare breakfast for the family and staff, cleaned guest rooms that looked like museum exhibits, and studied basic Korean phrases on her phone during breaks. The other staff members were friendly but cautious around her. She was an outsider in every possible way. Foreign, black, unable to communicate beyond gestures and broken sentences. She also learned about Jessica Jimin, though not from what people said, but from what they didn't say. Conversations stopped when Jessica's name came up. Staff members scattered when her car pulled into the driveway. And though Jessica's social media showed her volunteering at orphanages and donating to charities, Amy noticed how the household staff's shoulders tensed whenever she appeared. On Amy's third evening, she watched from a window as Jessica posed for photographs in the garden, her smile radiant and warm for the camera. The moment the photographer left, that smile vanished like a mask removed. Jessica snapped her fingers at a young gardener who'd left tools visible in the background. Amy couldn't hear the words, but she saw the gardener's face crumble, saw him bow repeatedly in apology, saw Jessica's cold dismissal. Amy's stomach twisted with familiar recognition. She'd seen this before, people who performed kindness publicly while crushing those without power to fight back. It was why she'd spoken up in Atlanta. It was why she'd lost everything. That night, she held her grandmother's Bible and whispered into the darkness of her small room. I came here to hide, Grandma. I came here to stay quiet and keep my head down. I can't afford to speak up again. I just can't. But even as she said it, she felt her grandmother's words pressing against her heart like a promise she couldn't break. Justice speaks every language. Don't ever stop speaking truth. Amy closed her eyes and prayed for the strength to stay silent. Because speaking truth had already cost her everything once. She couldn't survive losing everything again. But sometimes the universe doesn't care what we can survive. Sometimes it puts us exactly where we need to be, whether we're ready or not. And in just 2 days, Amy would face a choice that would test whether staying silent was truly survival or just another way of dying. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt torn between staying safe and speaking truth, stay with me. Because what happens next will remind you why some battles are worth fighting, even when you're terrified. Hit that like button and subscribe. This journey is just beginning. Day 5 began like any other morning at the Park estate. Amy woke before dawn, her body still adjusting to the time difference, and made her way to the kitchen where the familiar sounds of breakfast preparation already filled the air. She'd started picking up Korean phrases from the other staff members, stumbling through Annyeonghaseyo and Gamsahamnida with an accent that made the younger maids giggle behind their hands. But they giggled kindly, and Amy found herself almost smiling as she polished the already spotless silverware in the dining hall. Mrs. Choi bustled past, reviewing her checklist for the afternoon. Miss Jessica had scheduled a tea service with 3 influential women from Seoul's social elite, the kind of event where everything had to be perfect down to the angle of the napkin folds. Amy watched Mrs. Choi's practiced hands arrange porcelain teacups, each movement precise and rehearsed. Then Mrs. Choi's phone rang. Amy saw the color drain from the older woman's face. She heard fragments of rapid Korean, Mrs. Choi's voice climbing higher with each word. The phone slipped from her trembling fingers. Another staff member caught it, speaking quickly into the receiver while Mrs. Choi pressed both hands against the counter, her whole body shaking. What happened? Amy moved closer, touching Mrs. Choi's shoulder gently. My son, Mrs. Choi whispered in broken English, tears already streaming down her face. He collapsed. School called ambulance. Hospital says maybe meningitis. Maybe. She couldn't finish the sentence. Amy's heart clenched. She'd seen this before, the terror of a parent facing their child's mortality. You need to go. Right now. But Miss Jessica, The tea service, I cannot leave. I'll cover for you. Amy's voice came out steadier than she felt. Tell me what needs to be done. I'll handle it. Mrs. Choi looked at her with desperate hope and deeper fear. Miss Jessica, she doesn't like changes. She doesn't like when things are different. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. And even if it does, your son needs his mother more than Jessica needs perfect tea. Amy squeezed her hand. Go, now. I've got this. Mrs. Choi grabbed her purse and ran. Amy spent the next 2 hours memorizing Mrs. Choi's notes, arranging the tea service exactly as specified, checking and rechecking every detail. The other staff members helped silently, their faces tight with worry, though whether they worried more for Mrs. Choi's son or for what Jessica would do when she discovered the substitution, Amy couldn't tell. Jessica arrived 30 minutes early. Amy heard her heels clicking against marble before she saw her. That distinctive sharp rhythm that made every staff member straighten their posture and avoid eye contact. Jessica swept into the tea room in a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than Amy's annual salary. Her hair styled in perfect waves, her makeup flawless. She stopped when she saw Amy. Where is Mrs. Choi? She had a family emergency, ma'am. I've prepared everything according to her specifications. Jessica's eyes went cold. Not hot with anger, cold, like a blade fresh from ice water. Family emergency. She picked up a teacup, examined it, set it down 1 inch to the left. And you thought you were qualified to replace her? I followed her instructions exactly. Do it again. All of it. Jessica gestured at the carefully arranged table. And this time, perhaps you'll manage not to embarrass me in front of my guests. Amy bit the inside of her cheek and started over. She felt the eyes of other staff members watching from doorways, their faces filled with pity they didn't dare voice. Jessica stood there the entire time, making small critical sounds, pointing out microscopic flaws that didn't exist. The second arrangement was perfect. Jessica made her do it a third time anyway. What exactly was Mrs. Choi's emergency? Jessica asked, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. Her son collapsed at school. They think it might be meningitis. He's at the hospital. So she abandoned her responsibilities for something the hospital staff can handle. Jessica pulled out her phone. Call her. Tell her she's fired. The room went silent. Someone dropped a spoon in the kitchen. The clatter echoed like thunder. Ma'am, her child might die. Amy heard her own voice from somewhere far away. Please. She's been with your family for years, which is precisely why she should know better than to prioritize anything over her duties here. Jessica's hand rose, fast as a striking snake, palm open and aimed at Amy's face. Amy's hand moved on instinct, social worker instinct, honed from years of de-escalating violent situations. Her fingers closed around Jessica's wrist. Not roughly, not aggressively, just firmly enough to stop the blow. Time stopped. Every person in the room froze mid-breath. Amy saw their faces. Shock, terror, disbelief. No one had ever touched Jessica Jimin. No one had ever dared. Footsteps on the stairs. Minho appeared in the doorway, his phone still in his hand, his expression shifting from confusion to something darker as he took in the scene. His fiancée, her wrist caught in the grip of the new foreign maid. The terrified staff members pressed against walls, the electric tension crackling through his home. Then another presence materialized, Halmini Park, moving silently in her traditional hanbok despite her 76 years. Her face held the kind of wisdom that comes from surviving wars and burying children and building empires from ashes. Her eyes saw everything. Jessica's raised hand, Amy's defensive posture. The fear etched into every servant's face. Minhoya, she said quietly in Korean, her voice carrying the weight of mountains. Is this your chosen bride? Jessica jerked her wrist free, her composure cracking just slightly. She assaulted me. This woman put her hands on me. But Halmini's ancient eyes had seen the truth. I saw a young woman prevent violence. The words hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. If you've ever been in a room where everything you thought you knew suddenly shifted, where masks fell away and truth stood naked and terrible. Then you know this moment. Stay with me. What happens next will either save Mrs. Choi's job or destroy Amy's last chance at peace. Drop a like if you're still breathing. Jessica's face transformed in an instant. The cold mask melted into something softer, more vulnerable. She pressed a hand to her chest and turned to Minho with glistening eyes. I'm sorry, darling. I've been under so much stress with the wedding planning. I overreacted. Her voice dripped with practiced sweetness. This poor woman was only trying to help, and I let my emotions get the better of me. Amy watched the performance with sick recognition. She'd seen this before, people who could switch personas like changing clothes. Minho's jaw tightened. He looked at Amy, then at the terrified staff members still frozen against the walls, then at his grandmother whose expression revealed nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice carried quiet authority that made everyone straighten. Everyone in this household matters. Everyone. There are no disposable people under this roof. Jessica's smile flickered, just for a second. Then her phone shattered the tension with a shrill ring. She glanced at the screen and Amy saw her face change again. This time not a performance, but genuine confusion. Unknown number. Korean area code. Jessica hesitated, then answered with her practiced cheerful greeting. The voice on the other end spoke rapid Korean. Amy couldn't understand the words, but she understood the effect. Jessica's face drained of every drop of color. Her hands started trembling so violently the phone nearly slipped from her fingers. No, Jessica whispered in English. No, you have the wrong person. The male voice continued, each word hitting Jessica like a physical blow. Her knees buckled slightly. She grabbed the edge of a chair for support. Jessica. Minho moved toward her. Who is it? The phone fell from her hands, clattering against the marble floor. Jessica stared at it like it was a venomous snake. Halmini bent down with surprising grace for her age and picked up the phone. Who is this? She asked in Korean, her voice commanding respect. Amy watched Halmini's face as she listened. The old woman's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, a recognition of something dark and familiar. Tell her Justice remembers Busan, the male voice said, loud enough for Amy to hear. Tell her Detective Kim Sung-jae remembers. The call ended. Halmini lowered the phone slowly, her gaze fixed on Jessica with the intensity of someone reading a book whose ending she suddenly understood. Jessica's legs gave out. She would have hit the floor if Minho hadn't caught her, his arms wrapping around her instinctively despite the confusion written across his face. Jessica, who was that? What's happening? Nobody. Jessica's voice came out in gasps. Wrong number. Must be wrong number. I don't know anyone in Busan. I've never. The phone buzzed with an incoming text message. Minho still held Jessica, but his eyes dropped to the screen in Halmini's weathered hands. The old woman read it first, her lips pressing into a thin line. Then she turned the phone so Minho could see. Amy couldn't read Korean, but she saw Minho's face transform from concern to horror as he read. His arms loosened around Jessica. She stumbled back, wrapping her arms around herself. You recruited my sister. Minho read aloud in English, his voice hollow. You smiled and promised her modeling jobs. We never saw her again. I found your new name, your new life. Run all you want. I'm already here. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Staff members began whispering frantically in Korean. Amy caught fragments with her limited understanding. Busan, trafficking, police. Minho's hands were shaking now too. Jessica, what happened in Busan? It's not what you think. Jessica backed away from him, from Halmini, from the staring staff members. You don't understand. You weren't there. Halmini's voice cut through the chaos, gentle as falling snow but hard as winter ice beneath. Child, lies grow heavier with each breath. Speak truth. Jessica's carefully constructed walls crumbled. Tears streaked her perfect makeup. Her voice cracked as words tumbled out like water breaching a dam. Before I met you, I was different. I was nobody. I was desperate. She looked at Minho with pleading eyes. I needed money. My family had debts. I was drowning. What did you do? Minho's voice barely rose above a whisper. There was this modeling agency in Busan. They said they needed someone with my look, someone educated, trustworthy, beautiful. They paid me to recruit other girls. Jessica's hands twisted together. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know. I just smiled and promised these young women opportunities. Fashion careers. International travel. A better life. Amy's stomach turned to ice. She knew exactly where this was going. How many? Hermione asked. Jessica's face crumpled. Dozens. Maybe more. I stopped counting. Her voice dropped to barely audible. When the police investigation got close, they helped me disappear. New identity. New social media presence. New life in Seoul. I thought I could leave it behind. Minho stepped back from her like she was on fire. You trafficked human beings. I didn't know what they would do with them. Jessica's voice climbed toward hysteria. I swear I thought it was legitimate. By the time I understood, it was too late. I was in too deep. Not knowing does not erase responsibility. Hermione's words fell like a judge's gavel. Amy felt her grandmother's Bible pressing against her heart across 10,000 miles. She'd run from corruption in Atlanta only to find it wearing designer dresses in Seoul. Justice truly did speak every language. Evil truly had no borders. Have you ever watched someone's entire life unravel in real time? Ever seen the moment when lies finally demand their payment? Stay with me because what happens next will test whether redemption is possible or if some sins are too dark to ever escape. Hit that subscribe button. Some of you need to see this through to the end. The silence that followed Hermione's words pressed down on the marble hall like a physical weight. Jessica stood there shaking, mascara streaking down her face, her carefully constructed world disintegrating around her. Minho looked at the woman he'd planned to marry as if seeing a stranger. The staff members remained frozen, witnesses to the unraveling of everything they'd feared but never dared speak aloud. The doorbell rang. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. Everyone turned toward the entrance. The security guard looked at Minho, uncertain whether to answer during such chaos. Minho gave a single, sharp nod. The doors opened to reveal a man in his early 40s wearing a worn suit that had seen too many sleepless nights. His eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who'd spent years chasing ghosts. He held a battered leather briefcase in one hand and several file folders in the other. His gaze swept the room, landing on Jessica, and something dangerous flickered across his face before he controlled it. He bowed deeply to Minho, the gesture respectful despite the circumstances. Park Minho SSI. I apologize for this intrusion into your home. Minho's voice came out steady, though Amy could see the tension in his shoulders. You're the one who called. Yes, my name is Detective Kim Sung-jae. I've been tracking Miss Jessica for 2 years. He stepped further into the hall, and 2 uniformed police officers followed at a respectful distance. I should have come sooner. I should have stopped her before she reached your family. Jessica made a sound like a wounded animal. She tried to back toward the door, but there was nowhere to run. Hermione moved with surprising speed, positioning herself to block the exit without appearing to do so. Detective Kim set his briefcase on a side table and opened it with practiced efficiency. My younger sister, Kim Eugene, disappeared 3 years ago. She was 19 years old. She wanted to be a model. His voice remained professional, but Amy heard the grief underneath. Old grief, worn smooth by time but never truly healed. She met Miss Jessica at a coffee shop in Busan. Jessica was everything Eugene dreamed of being. Beautiful, successful, confident. They became friends. Or so my sister believed. He pulled out a photograph, holding it so everyone could see. A young woman with a bright smile, her whole future ahead of her, standing next to Jessica. The 2 of them looked like sisters themselves, arms around each other, both laughing at something beyond the camera's frame. Eugene called my mother the day before she vanished. She was so excited. She said Jessica had arranged auditions with international agencies. She said this was her big chance. Detective Kim's hand trembled slightly as he set down the photo and pulled out another document. We never saw her again. Jessica collapsed onto a chair, her face buried in her hands. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know what they would do. You knew enough. Detective Kim's control cracked just slightly. You knew enough to take their money. You knew enough to smile and lie and deliver innocent women into hell. He spread out more evidence across the table. Photographs of other young women. Testimony transcripts from grieving families. Financial records showing payments made to Jessica's old accounts. Phone records. Text messages. A paper trail of human misery stretching across 3 years. Do you know what my mother died believing? Detective Kim looked directly at Jessica now, his exhausted eyes meeting her tear-filled ones. That her daughter was still alive somewhere, suffering. That Eugene was calling out for us, wondering why we didn't come save her. My mother died of a broken heart, holding on to hope that was really just prolonged torture. I'm so sorry. Jessica's voice broke completely. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back the stolen years. Detective Kim's words landed like stones. Sorry doesn't resurrect my mother. Sorry doesn't tell me where my sister's body is buried, if she's even dead. Sorry is just a word you say when you finally get caught. Minho stood. The movement commanded everyone's attention. His face had transformed from shock to something harder, something forged in the moment between who he thought he was and who he needed to become. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of a man who just learned the most painful lesson of his life. Detective Kim, you have my complete cooperation. Access to any resources my family can provide. Whatever you need to find these women or bring justice to their families. He turned to Jessica, and Amy saw his heart breaking in real time. Our engagement is over. You will face justice for what you've done. His legal team, who'd been summoned by security, stood near the doorway. Minho addressed them without looking away from Jessica. Arrange full cooperation with the police. Establish a victim compensation fund from family resources. Whatever amount Detective Kim deems appropriate. He finally turned to his grandmother, and Amy saw a son seeking forgiveness from the woman who'd raised him. I failed to see clearly. I won't make that mistake again. Jessica stood, reaching for Minho with desperate hands. Minho, please. I love you. I wanted to change. That's why I came to Seoul. Why I tried to become someone better. Minho's response came quietly, but every word cut clean through the noise. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth. If you loved yourself, you would have stopped hurting people. The uniformed officers stepped forward. One of them produced handcuffs with practiced efficiency. Jessica didn't resist as they secured her wrists. As they led her toward the door, she looked back one final time, her face destroyed by tears and the weight of consequences finally arriving. I really did want to change, she whispered. Minho met her eyes one last time. Then face what you've done. That's where change begins. Have you ever seen someone lose everything because they refused to face their past? Ever watched justice finally catch up to someone who thought they'd escaped? Some of you are skipping ahead right now, but others, you're feeling something shift inside you. Like if you think some truths are worth the cost of speaking them. The police cars disappeared down the estate's long driveway, taking Jessica and the last remnants of Minho's illusions with them. The household stood in stunned silence, processing what they'd witnessed. Staff members who'd lived in fear for months looked at each other with expressions somewhere between relief and disbelief. The marble hall that had hosted elegant parties and important business meetings now felt like the aftermath of a storm. Everything still standing, but forever changed. Halmini moved through the frozen crowd with the grace of someone who'd navigated far worse catastrophes. She approached Amy, her weathered hand reaching out to touch the younger woman's arm. She spoke in Korean, her voice carrying warmth that needed no translation, though a young staff member stepped forward to interpret. She asks why you did it, the translator said softly. Why you dared to stand against Miss Jessica when no one else would. Amy looked into those ancient eyes and saw her own grandmother reflected back. The same wisdom earned through survival. The same understanding that some truths matter more than comfort. Because it was wrong. That's the same in any language. The translator conveyed Amy's words. Halmiani's face transformed. Tears pooling in eyes that had witnessed wars and buried loved ones and built empires from nothing. She pulled Amy into an embrace that crossed every cultural barrier, every difference of language and experience. When she pulled back, she spoke again, and the translator's voice wavered with emotion. She says you understand what many never learn. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the presence of something more important than fear. Minho cleared his throat. He stood at the center of the marble hall, surrounded by the staff members who'd served his family faithfully while living under Jessica's shadow. When he spoke, his voice carried in both Korean and English, ensuring everyone understood. I owe each of you an apology. I brought someone into this household who caused pain and fear. I failed to protect you. I failed to see what was happening under my own roof. He bowed deeply, the gesture profound in its cultural significance. A man of his position bowing to those who served him. That changes now. You will have counseling resources available, better working conditions, and my personal guarantee that no one will ever face retaliation for speaking truth again. The staff members stood in shocked silence. Several of the older women wiped tears from their eyes. This was not the world they knew, where power acknowledged failure and sought to make amends. The service entrance burst open and Mrs. Choi rushed in, her face pale with exhaustion but radiating relief. My son, the doctors say he will recover. The antibiotics are working. He'll be home in a week. She looked around at the gathered crowd, sensing something monumental had shifted. What happened? Why is everyone? The other staff members rushed to tell her, their words tumbling over each other in rapid Korean. Amy watched Mrs. Choi's expression change from confusion to disbelief to something approaching awe. The older woman turned to Amy and dropped to her knees in a deep bow of gratitude. Amy moved quickly, helping Mrs. Choi to her feet with gentle firmness. No bowing. We just take care of each other. That's all. The days that followed brought changes that rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. Detective Kim's unit located 3 of the missing women alive, held in terrible conditions but breathing. Their families' prayers finally answered after years of silence. Minho's Victim Compensation Fund provided resources to families who would never see their daughters again but could at least afford proper memorials and counseling. Jessica's trial made national news, bringing closure to dozens of families while exposing the trafficking networks that had operated in shadows for too long. Minho began the painful process of examining every aspect of his business operations, bringing in ethics consultants and investigators to ensure his empire was built on legitimate foundations. Amy found herself promoted to household manager, her unique perspective valued as she helped bridge cultural understanding among the diverse staff. 3 weeks after that impossible moment in the marble hall, Amy stood in the estate's traditional Korean garden as the sun began its descent over Seoul. The city stretched out below, a contradiction of ancient temples and modern skyscrapers, tradition and innovation existing side by side. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Minho approaching, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful. They sat on a wooden bench overlooking the garden, comfortable in silence that didn't need filling. Finally, Minho spoke in careful English. My grandmother told me something today. She said, true power protects, not controls. Amy nodded, thinking of her own grandmother's worn Bible and handwritten words. My grandmother said something similar. Justice speaks every language. You proved that. Minho's voice carried genuine respect. You came to a country not your own, faced someone everyone feared, and you didn't hesitate. I hesitated, Amy admitted, but I remembered. Some things are worth being afraid for. Halmiani appeared as if summoned by their conversation, settling herself between them with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. She spoke in Korean, and Amy reached for her phone's translation app, but Minho gently stopped her hand and translated himself, capturing the full depth of his grandmother's words. In Korea, we say Gadian Ingen, which means a human-like. You, Amy, taught us all that justice, courage, compassion. These have no borders. These are not American values or Korean values. These are human values. The three of them sat together as the sun painted Seoul in shades of gold and amber. Three people from different worlds, different languages, different experiences, united by the simple truth that some things matter